Welcome to Atheist Talk. I'm your host tonight, George Kane. Tonight's program is being taped immediately following the conclusion of the Atheist Alliance Convention in Washington, D.C. My guest tonight is Steve Peterson, the chair of Minnesota Atheists, and Steve was one of our members who was in attendance at that convention, and we're going to discuss it tonight. It was extremely successful, probably the most successful conference of atheists ever held in the United States. It very early sold out the maximum 300 registrants, and they had a waiting list of 500 people who wanted to attend, but there was no room for them. So, Steve, you've been involved with Atheist Alliance conventions really since the beginning, haven't you?
That's correct, George. I was one of the original board members. Two members of Minnesota Atheists, myself and Marie Castle, were representatives for a long time for Minnesota Atheists, and today August Berkshire is our representative. But I was on their board for about 10 years, and I was there during the brainstorming session in 92, 93, when we were deciding what the Alliance should do, and there were two things we thought we could do. One of them was do a publication, and it's evolved into a couple different things, and now is called Secular Nation. But the one thing that was unique for the Alliance to do was to do conventions, because the Alliance is, it's truly an alliance of a diverse group of atheist organizations. And we've done conventions every year since 1995, and some of the conventions have all had one unique quality to them, is that they have drawn from the strengths of all the different organizations around, nationally, internationally, and locally. And that's been a hallmark of an Atheist Alliance convention, and that was really what happened at this convention here, where people from around the world attended, and in the United States, all of the major organizations contributed to it. And but when the Alliance started in 1995 with conventions, we started in Los Angeles, California, in Hollywood, as a matter of fact, at the Beverly Gardens Hotel. And at that convention, we featured people from Freedom from Religion Foundation and from Council of, well, it's called Center for Inquiry now. It was Council for Secular Humanism. They were some of the bigger names that attended at that time. And over the years, these conventions have worked. In 1996, Minnesota hosted the convention. I think you were part of that. Was that?
No.
That a little bit? Did you come in just a little bit after that?
Just after that, right.
Oh gosh, you missed out on all the fun work.
Yep.
Because the Alliance is all volunteers. And this convention, for the most part, in Washington, D.C., was put on primarily by volunteers. That's the other unique thing. The Alliance has a very limited part-time paid person. Otherwise, it's all volunteers that put it together. And the volunteers do it out of a passion for what, a passion and a dedication. They like going to these events. They like sitting around in the camaraderie of being with other atheists. But they also want to be intellectually challenged. And this particular convention, and we'll talk about this in a little while, the Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris combination certainly challenged everybody at this convention. But in 2003, what really brought these conventions together was Margaret Downey from the Free Thought Society of Greater Philadelphia, a spokesperson from time to time for Freedom from Religion Foundation, and a board member of the Atheist Alliance, had a connection with Richard Dawkins. And they developed the Richard Dawkins Award. And in 2003, the Alliance started giving that award out. But Richard Dawkins, giving his time, he comes to these conventions for the Alliance at his own expense, his own time, and he tries to attend every other convention in person. But even when the award is given out and he's not there personally, he'll put together a videotape presentation. It's still worth the price of admission just to listen to it. But James Randi was the first recipient, and Ann Druyan was the second recipient. She co-wrote almost all of with Carl Sagan. Yes. Almost all of the books. He got the credit, but she did equal work on them. And Penn and Teller received the award for their Clarity in Their Bullshit series, which can be seen on Showtime. Or you can purchase, or if you go to Las Vegas, go see their act, because their act incorporates debunking of all kinds of myths, including religion myths. Julia Sweeney for her Letting Go of God, and this year it was Daniel Dennett who authored the book Breaking the Spell. And one thing, Richard Dawkins, and you've been to some of these conventions, and
yes.
Richard Dawkins enjoys people with the intellectual capacity to know a subject extraordinarily well, but explain it so the average person can understand it. So when you pick up Daniel Dennett's book, Breaking the Spell, the average person can read this book and know what's going on with it. Sometimes a criticism Dawkins has is scholars tend to write for other scholars. And those of us who are lay people and do not have degrees in philosophy, George, you have an advantage here because you could probably figure some of it out. But this is written from a point of view of a scholar, a person who has a PhD in philosophy, but is also works in cognitive studies. And so he's using the scientific method to incorporate his philosophy.
And it's a study of religion.
Yeah, and that's particularly what this
phenomenon.
is, as religion as a natural phenomenon. And but Dawkins appreciates that the average person can pick this up. You do not need a degree in philosophy to understand it. Pick it up on the street, pick it up at an airport, flying on a plane, you're going to get a lot out of that book. Mm-hmm. That's what Dawkins likes. And that's how all the awards are generally geared for. So,
right. So this conference had just an incredible lineup, especially for an all-volunteer organization. You've mentioned Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, Ayaan Hirsi Ali was there, and quite a few others, Julia Sweeney. So why don't we start going through the list of events, and you can tell me what your recollections of them. Shall we begin with Friday?
But we should probably, this was one of the first conventions webcast, which made
Yes.
it unique. And on this program, I was there in attendance in person, but George did a webcast of at least the Friday night speakers.
That's right. Just Friday night, when the two speakers were Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris. And the way it worked, I was able to buy a password for the webcast. And that was $35 charge, very reasonable. And I have a large party room in the apartment complex that I live in. And so I had I put out an open invitation, and we had 19 people come over. And I have a projector that I hooked up to my laptop, and everything worked out pretty well. I don't think they really had the quality, technical quality, that I'm sure they'll have in future usages of this. Lighting especially was poor. There were a couple of technical glitches.
Yeah. The one aspect, and I'm a person who works on logistics of conventions more than I'm a person who is good at critiquing the actual content of a lot of the speakers. But what happens when you do these conventions, they're in long rooms, and you cannot always get the 15, 20-foot ceilings. That's the practicality of availability and what you can think you can afford. And these had 9-foot ceilings, and then if you were in attendance, they had banners in the front, which were for the audience and looked like a really great idea. Richard Dawkins Foundation had a banner, the Atheist Alliance, the local hosting organization, WASH, Washington Area Secular Humanists, had a banner, and the Secular Web had a banner, Secular Student Alliance. And but one of the problems of that was because they needed the maximum use of the room because of the attendance, those banners cut the lighting slightly on the stage, which I think impacted the webcast.
And might have cut camera angles, too.
Yeah, well, the tough thing on the camera angles was that the attendance was so large, there was almost no room left for cameras. And that's another reality. Next year's convention will be done much different because this convention was set up before all the big name speakers said yes. And then suddenly, so the convention site turned out to be too small. And people who paid to get there, they tried to get in the room. And there was competition between seating and cameras. And in reality, to webcast it, to the people paying $35 for the Friday night stream or $95 for the entire, you could buy the entire convention stream for $95. Those people deserve to be able to see that convention with great clarity. So I think that'll be worked out, but most of the people, there were people from Freedom from Religion Foundation, American Atheists, Center for Inquiry, the American Humanist Association. Their conventions are going to change because of that webcasting. People from all over the world, it was live cast to Iceland because the Icelandic Atheist received an award. And they there was a time difference, but they had set up a live cast to give their award live to the people in Iceland.
Right. Well, since it is on the internet, it would be live.
Yeah,
Of course, there's a difference in time zones, so it may have been
an inconvenience. Yeah. But they could watch it live while they were receiving their award. And there were a number of university classes around the country that universities had, people had procured time at a university, small auditorium or something, and a variety of libraries also carried it on their web, be able to show it in their library. So the availability for people around the country, in the world, to see this as it happened was really kind of the unique idea. And the technical side of it will get worked out hopefully next year. I made the
embarrassing mistake that when I announced that I was having this webcast in my party room, I added an hour instead of subtracting it.
Because it's at Easter time and we're in Central.
Right. And so I had to send out an embarrassed correction.
And those people in Iceland had to add 4 hours.
Right.
Now, people can also buy, the Alliance has been doing this for a few years, DVDs, and somebody can go to the Alliance website and buy it a DVD.
So why don't we start talking about some of the speakers, because there was quite a full program for the weekend. So Friday night, when we had Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris, what were your impressions of them?
It was a surreal event to be there live, and I'll be curious to know. I sent an email to somebody and I said the convention went great. Went very good. Dawkins was great. Sam Harris told us we should give up labels, atheists, humanists, free thinkers, and just be happy to undermine religion. And Hitchens told everybody who didn't agree with him, with his version of the Iraq War, we're all fools. But that's Christopher Hitchens. He pulls no punches, even to atheists. Richard Dawkins, what was so surreal is Richard Dawkins, and there's a critique by Matt Purple on cnsnnews.com, a web-based, and he said, Dawkins portrayed a black-white intellectual battle between atheism and religion. And that's pretty much the way Dawkins has been talking. He's been giving speeches like that. And he's an excellent ambassador for atheism. And it's not that he's dogmatic. He just says that's the only reasonable position you can take.
I think so. I think that there is in the public a widespread perception that atheists have become very combative because of strong positions that have been argued by the leading authors now, by Dawkins, by Harris, and by Hitchens. But really, I think in personality, each of the three is extremely well-mannered, mild-mannered, and would be hard to take offense from hearing them speak directly.
Yeah, well, Hitchens in his book God Is Not Great, he's pretty aggressive, but if you ever see him live or see him on an interview program, he's actually pretty gracious. He knows what he's talking about, and if somebody is wrong, he instantly corrects them. But that's a routine of you should know your stuff if you're going to get on and talk about it.
And I've seen Hitchens when he was presented with material that was deliberately trying to provoke him, and he can't be provoked. He took it very much in stride.
Well, he's extraordinarily well read, and Dawkins. He's just this is what was really neat. Dawkins is just an incredible intellect on how human nature evolved. I mean, and his ability to discuss it, and he really has lost with the people who have the intellectual capability but refuse to objectively review the evidence. He loses patience with,
right.
Because they're intellectually dishonest.
Evolution, of course, is Dawkins' field. He's a biologist, a professor of evolution.
But he's the first to admit, and this came up in a question, well, when you say that you're an atheist, aren't you being dogmatic and closing off? And he says, well, you know, if the evidence change, it isn't that you can say no to the idea of God. You can't, because there is always the possibility facts will change. But you have to be objective of the facts we know today. And out of that, he sees no evidence of a God.
Right. The atheist, I think, is in a very different position from the theist, from the God believer, in that as an atheist, any of us can tell you what it would take to prove to us that we're wrong.
In evidence.
Yeah.
If there's evidence, and Dawkins readily admits, if the evidence change, I will change.
Right. Whereas theists, I have not yet heard a good answer from anyone as to what it would take to convince them that they're wrong, that there is no God.
And he did a series of film clips of people that want to make him look bad,
Yes.
and where they will edit it and they ask him a question like, can you, I'm trying to remember the question. I thought it was, can you
give an example of a mutation that actually introduced more information? I think
yeah, and then they show him as if he can't answer it, and he's looking, and he's looking, and he's looking. And then this goes around to the web, and other people start manipulating the tape. And, of course, the original question wasn't a direct question to him. It was a manipulation of tape.
Dawkins realized right away that this was the sort of question that the questioner had to be a creationist.
And then other creationists use this tape and throw in more questions so he looks like an idiot. But then when asked, well, how are we going to confront it? Well, they came up with Minnesota's own P.Z. Myers.
Yes, and whom we all know, a friend of ours. I thought it was charming that Dawkins referred to him as P.Z. Myers.
P.Z. Myers. Well, that was more clarity. See, on the web, you might have had a little bit more clarity and attention than some of us being distracted by trying to see around cameras. To counterbalance, given particularly that these two speeches were put on the web, Sam Harris, the author of End of Faith, was on, and
Sam Harris is. Oh yes.
Yeah, he was the second speaker.
Right.
Dawkins received at least 3 standing ovations.
Yeah.
And he was giving what the crowd was there to hear, but this was Dawkins at what he does. Sam Harris gave a talk completely different than what he wrote in his book.
Right.
And I'll use the same source here by Matt Purple. By contrast, Harris' speech was a more temperate critique of atheist movement himself. While Harris said he believed science was ultimately destroy religion, he also discussed spiritualism and mysticism, and called for a greater understanding of allegedly spiritual phenomena. there were no applauses during
Yeah.
Harris's speech.
I
It
will
was
admit that when
very subtle.
when the webcast was over that night, I apologized to everyone who showed up for the Harris presentation being so disappointing.
I thought Harris had an intellectual point he wanted to make, and I didn't mind him making it, but if that was what he wanted to do, I think he should have communicated
And
it,
let's just say
and
what
he
that
should have
point
been
was.
on. Yeah, well, the point was is that we should get rid of our labels. We should not call ourselves atheists, freethinkers, humanists, secular humanists, rationalists. We should just be content with undermining religion with reason. And it's a great intellectual point, but it seems to defy all human nature we know of.
I think there are a number of counter-arguments. He did argue that if lots of people do not believe in unicorns, but you don't call them an a-unicornist.
Yeah.
And that's reasonable enough. But I think there are plenty of substantial reasons that it's important to use the term atheist and get the term atheist out. I've met several people who felt isolated, who were atheists, but felt that they were the only ones. Didn't realize there were any other public atheists, didn't realize there were any organizations that they could
And as
contact.
organizations, I think we represent. I had this discussion with people who thought we were dishonest, that our greater good would be served if we called ourselves brights. And it's a new term that's out there, an umbrella term for. And in fact, Dennett talks about it in here. He says, you know, homosexuals changed to be gays, and it helped improve their image. So atheists, secular humanists, freethinkers, we could be brights. And but there's a certain identification that people have, and atheist, whether we like the term or not, has an identification, and we debunk stereotypes every day with Minnesota Atheists. But I'm without theism. That's who I am.
Right.
It's natural to me.
Right. It's an
It's not
important
a
part
negative.
of our identity.
Yeah. And if religion became benign, well, Minnesota Atheists would go away. So Sam Harris' point of reason winning out, well, if reason really won out, there would be no need for Minnesota Atheists. I'm not sure that he gave his talk a lot of thought. I think that this is my personal opinion, that he actually underestimated the importance of this convention. And instead of use his time wisely and make points a lot more clear. If his point was just that, he should have been on maybe Saturday afternoon and put somebody else on that prime spot.
Moving along, can you mention some other highlights of the weekend, what you thought were important moments?
I went to one talk by Mike Estes. He was a black man who was interested in the history of the civil rights movement. He gave a fantastic talk, and that was a workshop. But most of the people he talked about is contained in this book that somebody could pick up, African American Humanism by Norm Allen. He did his own research and had a great PowerPoint. I thought that he was a highlight for me personally. And there was this Somali woman,
Ayaan Hirsi.
Ayaan Hirsi. Her talk was just riveting. She should have been on instead of Sam Harris. This woman, against all odds, grew up in Somalia and watched her country completely fall apart. And then her father, in a very short thing, her father tried to sell her, and she got refugee status in the Netherlands. And
became a legislator.
It became a legislator. Learned their language, and then learned English. But she not only learned language like English, she learned all of the cultural. One of her key points was that she read what was the book series? The Drew. I can't remember it, but. She knew American culture so well for
Nancy
somebody.
Drew?
Nancy Drew, yeah.
Yes.
That was one of her big series that she learned American culture from. with the
Theo
French.
Van Gogh.
And you know this story, and you should tell the story because she collaborated to do a documentary on Muslim women, and it cost him his life.
Right. Theo Van Gogh, when riding into work, was attacked by a Muslim assailant. He was shot. He was then stabbed. And when he was dead, the assailant took a huge knife and nailed with this knife a letter to Theo Van Gogh's chest. And that letter was addressed to Ayaan Hirsi Ali.
And security was extraordinarily tight. She had an armed guard with her at all times. And Hitchens made this point. He followed her. And he said, what has this country come to when a woman of integrity comes here and needs an armed guard at all times? There were security dogs that were there sniffing for bombs because several of the speakers had death threats against her. She was the main one that had a death threat against her.
Yes.
And we had to all go through full security to enter every day.
But this is not something that developed when she moved to the United States a short while ago, because even when she was living in Holland, she had this fatwa. She had to have bodyguards 24 hours a day. There were many complaints about her from the tenants in her apartment building.
Yeah. Well, that's the reality. She was just fantastic. And she was followed by Christopher Hitchens. And Christopher Hitchens actually, they couldn't find him for a few minutes, and then he just walked up, gave his own introduction, and said, well, I'd just rather take questions, and really had no speech. Because I'm not sure, he has his book, God Is Not Great, but most of the people in the audience know what's in this book, so he didn't see it as relevant to really give a critique.
Well, I'm afraid, Steve, that we're quickly running out of time. I do want to say that as successful as this Atheist Alliance Convention was, that there are other atheist organizations around the country that are holding conventions too. By the time this program goes to air, we'll have already passed the Freedom from Religion Foundation convention.
And that's an annual convention in generally October.
Right. And this year it's in Madison, Wisconsin. Next year in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities, we will be hosting the American Atheist Convention, which is something we're very much looking forward to.
And they had speakers that were there. Alan Johnson was there as president of American Atheists, and they had 2 other people from American Atheists.
Right. And I do want to say that if you enjoyed tonight's program, if you're interested in Minnesota Atheists, please contact us and we'll send you an issue of our newsletter. And we very much look forward to hearing from you, and if you're interested in us, we're interested in you.